And welcome back to a brand new episode of Now Showing with
John
and Cam. And we've been away for a little while. It's been some time since we put out a video, but we're finally back. And we wanted to come back with a big countdown-esque video. Not our traditional top 5 countdown, but something even larger in scale. Came up with the idea of making a video for you guys in which we are going to pick our favorite movie from every year since we were born. Now, John was born in 86, I was born in 88, so it's a pretty long run over 30 years of films. And when I came up with this idea, I was thinking, oh, it's going to be a lot of fun. There's going to be a lot of research that needs to be done. But
there was no fun had by anyone.
I didn't realize how difficult this list was going to be, because you go through the years and you're looking at all the releases for a certain year, and you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that all of these great films came out in this one year. And then you go to the next year and the same thing happens again, and you can only pick one. Now, before we get started, 2 things actually. One, the way we're going to do this is John will start it off because he has 2 years ahead of me, of course, being born in 86 compared to 88. So he'll be the only one doing the first 2 years. Once he gets to 88, then we're both going to be in the fold from then on out. We'll say some honorable mentions along the way. But what I really want to preface with this list is, remember, this is not what we consider to be necessarily the greatest movie of every year or the most well-made or critically acclaimed. This is our favorite movie of each year, meaning a movie that meant a lot to us. Maybe back then, maybe it grew on us over the years, but it's something that during that time frame or in the years to follow, it's a movie maybe we watch over and over again or revisit it every year. Doesn't mean it's got to be, a big blockbuster hit or something. So if we miss a movie that you're like, wait a minute, there's no way you didn't pick that, it might not be that we don't love that movie. It's just at that time, that movie didn't mean as much to us as what our pick is. So don't be offended by the list, and certainly in the comments, make sure you put what your favorite movie of each year is if you dare to do the task of going all the way through. But trust me, it's difficult. So,
it is.
Without further ado, John's going to start us off. He's going to start in 1986, then he'll go to 87, and then we will both go then from 88. So, John, if you want to start us off.
Yeah, certainly. I just wanted to say that this is probably one of the hardest lists that we... Actually, no, I'm going to say this was the hardest list.
For sure.
Because it's not so much like he was saying. It's not just like the greatest movie. But in the back of your head, you look at a year, you're like, oh, that was like one of the best movies of all time. You're like, I got to go with that. But then nostalgia kicks in, and you're like, oh, I have so many fond memories of watching that as a little kid. So there was a lot more to it. The entire time I was cussing him out because this was his brainchild.
He was texting me.
I'm going to try to come up with one now to get him back. But without anything else, I'll get right into it. 1986. So 1986 wasn't one of the hardest ones because going through there wasn't a whole lot that came out. But one movie that did come out that I definitely... is going to say that is my pick for 1986 is Aliens. It's a classic. I mean, for this year, I have one honorable mention, and that was Short Circuit. And yeah, as a kid, I liked Short Circuit, but I was going by like the impact that Aliens had. And between the two, I will go back and watch Aliens over and over. I watched Short Circuit a few years ago, and it just really didn't hold up as much as Aliens did. And Short Circuit is kind of like on the lines of E.T. If I was to pick between the two, I'd rather watch E.T. over Short Circuit. 1987 was a little bit of a harder pick for me because you guys know we're both huge horror fans. I love horror movies, but I also love cheesy over-the-top action movies in general. And Lethal Weapon came out in 1987, but so did Hellraiser, so I was kind of going back and forth between those two. When it all came down to it, Lethal Weapon did win out over Hellraiser, so Lethal Weapon's my pick for 1987. It's just an amazing movie. I mean, Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, I just love the story to it, the action, the acting, the comedy, all around, just a great movie. There is one other honorable mention for that year, and that is going to be Evil Dead 2.
Hmm.
If it was Evil Dead 1, that by all means would have won out. Evil Dead 2, close right there, but like I said, Lethal Weapon took it right there. So, 1988, the year this guy was born,
Mm-hmm.
was another one that this one was really kind of hard for me. My two honorable mentions, Beetlejuice and Bloodsport. I couldn't do this list without putting those on there. Beetlejuice, I mean, it's a classic. Bloodsport, I mean, as a guy, you're flipping through the channels, Bloodsport's on. I think it's in your DNA that you have to stop and watch it, regardless of what's going on. But my pick is also another kind of like DNA ingrained, like the stereotypical guy movie, and that's Die Hard. I could not. This was kind of one of those ones I looked as soon as I saw. I was like, it's got to be Die Hard. The other ones, like I said, was a little bit, but I mean, John McClane, yippee ki motherfucker. I mean, come on, like, and it was a movie that I just recently watched a documentary on it, and like there were so many different things about. No one thought that Bruce Willis could do it because like he was more of a TV comedic, sarcastic, and like this was a movie that really put him on the map. And then for the life of me, I can never remember the guy's name, the actor that plays Snape in Harry Potter.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it always slips my mind. I mean,
Yeah.
an amazing performance. He's a great actor also. Little quick fun fact, the scene whenever he's falling, he actually did not realize that he was going to be falling on the count that they gave him. He was deathly afraid to do that stunt. He did it himself, and the stunt coordinator thought that to get a more realistic reaction, they told him 1, 2, 3, we'll let you go. But on 2, they dropped him. So that's actual like real fear because he thought there was like a mess up, and like he was actually afraid. So yeah, Die Hard, 1988.
Yeah, can't go wrong with that pick. In 1988, you certainly have Die Hard. Beetlejuice, like you mentioned, was another one. Obviously, I wasn't watching any movies in '88 because I was just born, so I got to go look back at what I watched over the years that came out from that year.
And I wasn't 2 years old running around going, yippee motherfucker.
Yeah.
This was.
So going back and looking, there's definitely some staples for me. Child's Play, Hello. I mean, that's one of the most iconic horror films that are out there. I was obsessed growing up with a horror movie called Waxwork, which I used to watch all the time as a kid. But if I had to pick one movie that I've watched more than any of those throughout my life, in the horror movie realm is where I'll be, and that is Halloween 4, The Curse of Michael Myers. This was my favorite Halloween movie as a kid growing up. I even liked it more than the first one when I was a kid. Obviously, as I got older, the first one is my favorite. But I used to watch this movie over and over and over again. Young Danielle Harris cast in this. She was fantastic as young Jamie Lloyd. You had Dr. Loomis back, Donald Pleasance. This is my second favorite in all of the franchise. I've always held this movie near and dear, and I've watched it so many times, more than I can count. So for me, my favorite movie that came out in 1988 was Halloween 4, The Curse of Michael Myers.
I can definitely see that. All right, so 1989. Have you ever danced with the devil beneath the pale moonlight? I mean, if you know what that quote's from, you know what my pick is. That's the Tim Burton Batman movie starring Michael Keaton. I mean, I'm a huge comic book fan, like you guys kind of already know, and I just think this entry to like the Batman franchise is just golden. I mean, Jack Nicholson as the Joker. I mean, recently we've had a few people really knock it out of the park, but as far as keeping a traditional style Joker, I feel that Jack Nicholson is the best when it comes to that. By far, don't get me wrong, Jack Nicholson is third in my book when it comes to the Jokers, but I hold this one. And I have two honorable mentions. One, I'm going to go out on a limb. I don't know what his list is. I'm going to guess my first honorable mention is his pick, and that is Pet Sematary. And my other one, which actually, believe it or not, was fighting for my actual pick, that is All Dogs Go to Heaven. And when I was looking, I kind of forgot about this movie. When I was a little kid, every time I watched this, I bawled like a baby. And I'm willing to go out on a limb and say that if I watched this still today, there's a good chance that I would still tear up. I mean, this movie, like I said, it's right there, but I have to go with Batman over that. So
Yeah, 1989 was a tough one. I mean, you have All Dogs Go to Heaven, like you said. You have Pumpkinhead. You have Uncle Buck. You have Weekend at Bernie's. You have Little Monsters. You have Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I fought really hard between two movies. One that I didn't end up picking was Ghostbusters 2. I watched the hell out of this movie as a kid. I revisit a lot. But my pick I went with is the one that this guy guessed that it is, and that is Pet Sematary. Once again, I don't think it's the best movie of that year in terms of, like, well-crafted movie, but Pet Sematary has always been one of my favorite horror movies. I still watch it every year to this day because, to me, it's one of the few movies that scared the hell out of me as a kid and even throughout life. I still think it's one of the scariest concepts for a story ever created. It's one of the darkest, most visceral stories that you could think of. And because of the sheer fact that it scared the hell out of me, I've mentioned in previous videos, it gave me horrible nightmares, and for years there were scenes that I didn't watch in that movie because it scared me. And I just love it. So for me, I had to pick Pet Sematary because, once again, which one of these films have I revisited more than any others? And Pet Sematary was the one. So for me, staying in the horror realm for 1989, Pet Sematary was my pick.
I kind of figured that. So when going through the list, there were a few years that whenever they popped up, there was no ifs, ands, or buts. That was the movie. This one, it took me literally like half a second to pick the movie, and that was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. As soon as I saw that was the year, when I was a little kid, 1990. Yeah. When I was a little kid, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were my favorite. I had like all the action figures, bed sheets, you name it. I had a birthday party that was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Granted, they had a guy in a costume that I ran crying, screaming, scared to death of him. So that was kind of my parents still bring that up. But I mean, they just did a solid movie, a solid job at making this movie. Because I mean, really think about like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it really shouldn't work. Like if you really look at like what it is, but the creators do such a good job of like building the world where they make sense, and they did an amazing job with the movie. There were two honorable mentions that I do have to, because one is kind of part of my Christmas tradition. That's Home Alone. I could not mention that. And the other one is Problem Child. I guess 1990 was the year of like the bad little kids to an extent. Granted, Home Alone, he really wasn't a bad little kid, but compared to Problem Child. But yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, hands down.
Yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was one of my three considerations. Home Alone was the movie I thought I was going to pick until I realized there was another movie that came out. But once again, you got a lot of good ones. Edward Scissorhand, The Witches, Tom Savini's Night of the Living Dead remake came out in that year as well. Arachnophobia, which is a movie that scared the crap out of me because I hate spiders. But the movie I went with, it may surprise a lot of people because this is a low-budget film. This is a film that didn't come to theaters. This is a film that has a lot of controversy behind it. I could not pick it, though, even over Home Alone, and that is Clown House. Clown House is my favorite clown movie all time, even right up there with It. I think it's the creepiest clown movie ever made. I've watched it pretty much every year of my life. I go back and revisit it. Me and my brother were obsessed with this movie as kids. He even used to dress up like a clown. I mean, he was like 2 or 3 years old. He would put on like makeup and stuff on his face, and he would reenact scenes from that movie. The mannerisms of the clowns in this movie, and if you've never seen it, I highly recommend it because it still holds up very well today. There is a lot of controversy behind the film because of who the director is and what he did. I won't go into that. It's the same director who went on to make Jeepers Creepers. But honestly, Clown House, there's some cheesy dialogue and the ending isn't. It kind of ends abruptly, but the movie itself, I will still argue to this day that there is no better like creepy clown movie than this movie, and just all the history behind it. For me watching it, my brother, I've showed my friends over the years, I had to pick it even over Home Alone, which is a better movie, but Clown House means so much to me. I can quote pretty much any line from that movie, so for 1990 that has to be my pick. Clown House may be surprising, but like I said, it's not the most critically acclaimed or well-made movie of the year. It's our favorite from that year, and mine was Clown House.
Alright, so 1991, so two quick honorable mentions. Silence of the Lambs. I mean, putting the list together, if that's not your pick, you can't not have that as like an honorable mention. The other one is for me. This is personally for me, and this one actually was kind of fighting for my actual pick, and that is a movie called White Fang. Actually starred Ethan Hawke, who kind of kind of became a pretty big actor. Been in a lot of good movies, but White Fang. I love dogs. I had a Samoyed when I was little. I have a Husky now, and I also have my Lab mix. But like White Fang, it's about a guy that goes up to Alaska, and he rescues a dog, and him and this dog go on an adventure for gold and everything. And like I have a lot of fond memories watching that when I was little. But the pick that I did go with in 1991, once again, I couldn't not go with it because it was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. 1 year didn't change me from not loving the Ninja Turtles back then. And still to this day, I can go back and watch the first two Ninja Turtles. I don't care what anyone says. I think that they hold up. The practical effects, the guys in the costumes, the masks, the makeup effects of the turtles. I don't think it was cheesy. I think it still holds up. The only thing cheesy about the movies is the Vanilla Ice scene. But other than that, like they did a good job with Shredder, Rocksteady, and Bebop. They just did an amazing job. So 90 and 91 are both of the Ninja Turtle movies.
So, yeah, I mean, in 91 you had T2, which if I said what's the best movie of 91, I would pick T2, Terminator 2. That's the best movie of 91, but is it my favorite movie of 91? And the answer, when I went back and thought of myself as a child in those couple years that followed, was no. You also had My Girl this year. You had Hook. The pick that I thought when I first saw this list, I was like, oh, that's got to be my pick. And that was my biggest honorable mention is The People Under the Stairs, because I've loved this movie my whole life. I still think it's one of the most underrated horror films of all time. But there was one other movie I came across. It may surprise a lot of people, but I watched this movie over and over as a kid. And in that year and the years that follow, it made me laugh so much that my mom got so sick of me watching it that I think at one point she hid the movie so that I couldn't keep putting it on. My pick for my favorite movie of 1991 is a little movie called Drop Dead Fred. If you've never seen Drop Dead Fred, it's about a girl who gets this imaginary friend named Drop Dead Fred who is real to her, and he's just this goofy over-the-top guy, and he loves to do pranks. So he gets this little girl to do pranks on her mother, who's really like kind of mean, and and there's this really funny scene that always made me like laugh so hard I peed myself as a kid, where he's at the top of the stairs and he yells playtime, and he slides down like in a split down the steps, and he cracks his nuts off the bottom of the banister. I used to just keep rewinding that as a kid and laughing. And a part where they drag dog poop all throughout the house, and only this girl can see him, so he keeps getting her in trouble. But then he comes back to her as an adult, and she's trying to live an adult life. It was not a big hit when it came out, but it became this huge cult hit over the years. If you've never seen Drop Dead Fred, it still holds up pretty well today. But yeah, even in a year with T2 and Ninja Turtles, that movie I watched more than anything else. So Drop Dead Fred, 1991.
Yeah, that would be my wife's pick too for that year.
Really?
I never saw it when I was little. I somehow missed it. I never even knew of it. She told me to watch it probably, I think it was last year.
Oh, wow.
And I got done watching it and I asked her for the time back, honestly. I did not like it. I thought it was I don't think it holds up. So if you guys have seen that, give your opinion.
As a kid, do you think you would have liked it?
I might have liked it as a kid, but I think as an adult, I was just like, what the hell am I watching? And she could see it on my face because she's like, you don't have to watch this. I was like, Dana, you know that I started this. I have to see where it goes, regardless of how, like, my facial expression. Yeah. I'm not going to lie, there were some scenes that I did, but I just think, like, when she was an adult, some of the things she was going through, I was just like,
Gotcha.
But, alright, so, 1992. Once again, 1992, I looked up. As soon as I saw the movie, I knew that was going to be my pick. Honorable mentions real quick. Batman Returns. Ernest Scared Stupid. I don't care. I loved the Ernest movies when I was little. I'm going to once again say they don't really hold up.
No.
I've tried to watch them and I'm just kind of like, really? But yeah, as a little kid, I loved all the Ernest movies. Just a fun little thing. There's a meme, you can probably find it. I think it's hilarious. And it shows a picture of Ernest and John Cena next to each other, and it says John Cena is slowly turning into Ernest. And if you really look at it, he really is. Like it's crazy.
That's funny.
My other honorable mention, as horror, I could not put this on there, and that is Army of Darkness. But my pick, hands down, is going to be Aladdin. It is my all-time favorite Disney movie. I could still to this day watch it over and over. Um, when I was in high school, I actually worked at Hollywood Video, and I actually managed it. And you got to pick the movies that you would play, and I would drive my employees crazy because I would literally put Aladdin in because it was a family company, so you could only play like certain PG movies. So I would literally just put Aladdin on, and it would just play on repeat throughout the entire day. I mean, I don't think there is a better Disney movie than this, and I mean, I can't see anything else. Like, if we were gonna do like top tens of other lists, this would be on it. So I could not go with it.
Yeah, 92, you had Home Alone 2, The Mighty Ducks, Candyman, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I loved a movie as a kid called Ladybugs that had Rodney Dangerfield in it. But my pick had to be Aladdin as well. Because as a kid, this was my all-time favorite Disney movie. If I had to pick today, I would still pick it. From the Super Nintendo game, that is probably the Super Nintendo game I played more than anything else. I beat that game more times than I can count as a kid.
That would probably be my number one Super Nintendo game. Well, I wouldn't say number one. It would be top three.
It's definitely top three. I would have Zombies Ate My Neighbors right up there too, but not to go off on that. But the toys that I had with Aladdin, making my mom rewind and watch over and over and over again. It's just so. It's such a good story, and who can ever forget Robin Williams as the genie? I mean, just great performances. And I even feel like most Disney movies, I don't watch them anymore. I'm sure I'm going to be forced to now that I have a son. My wife's starting to introduce him. He's only one to some Disney movies. He likes The Lion King. So as he gets a little bit older, I'm sure I'm going to be revisiting them all again. But I feel like Aladdin's like the one that I could probably still watch today and enjoy. Yeah, it had to be Aladdin. There was no movie, that had the impact in 1992 that Aladdin did, for sure.
All right, so 1993, whenever I looked up, as soon as I saw the movie Tombstone, I was like, that's got to be it. But then I started looking, and as an adult, I would probably say Tombstone. But as a little kid, Homeward Bound. Homeward Bound was the movie. And I was like, between the two of them, which one really has... Yeah, Tombstone I hold in high regards as one of the greatest movies. Yeah. But, I don't have that, emotional attachment to it as I do Homeward Bound. I mean, another one, animal movies where the animal gets hurt or the animal does something, I cry. I bawl like a baby. This was another one. I watched this movie over and over and over. And I feel like this movie holds up because it wasn't extremely over the top, wasn't crazy CGI that didn't hold up. This movie still today is an amazing drama. The comedy is still relevant. The story is still relevant. The characters. Now there's two other honorable mentions. This was a really hard year, but Homeward Bound did take the cake. Tombstone was right up there. Nightmare Before Christmas is another one. I love Nightmare Before Christmas. If you look at my Christmas tree, I get Nightmare Before Christmas ornaments every single year as a collection. It's kind of a tradition, so that kind of was nudging. But once again, that's more still towards an adult. What had that emotional attachment? And the other one is Jurassic Park. But I felt like Jurassic Park was on there solely because it's just such an amazing movie. Not so much that I'm Homeward Bound, easily.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the ones I had for consideration. You had Nightmare Before Christmas. Jurassic Park, I thought I might pick. Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah.
Hello. Another one that I loved that year that was in my mind, Cool Runnings, about the Jamaican bobsled team. I watched that over and over again. Leprechaun came out that year. Look Who's Talking Now, which is my favorite of the Look Who's Talking movies, the one that has the dogs. The Sandlot came out that year. My goodness, how many times did I watch that? Now, if I had to pick, before I name what it is, if I had to pick the movie maybe as an adult that I enjoy watching the most from that year, Dazed and Confused it was in there. But I was thinking back at that time, I didn't watch Dazed and Confused. That's something that I watched later on, and I hold that movie very high. But the one I had to go with is the one that when I saw it, not only was I in love with it, but I kept watching it over and over again. And I think I believe I watch it at least once a year, every year. It's on TV all the time, so how can I not? My pick was Hocus Pocus. Hocus Pocus, man, as a kid I loved it. As an adult I love it. I don't really need to explain it. I'm sure most of you have seen it. one of the best, I think, Halloween Disney films ever made. Just so well done, with the three Sanderson sister witches, and they ignite the candle flame. The witches come back, and they turn the one character into a cat, and the brother and sister trying to survive the night from the witches and get their spell book. It's just such a fun movie that like a family can enjoy, an adult can enjoy, a child can enjoy. And I love horror movies, even though this isn't really like a horror movie. It was just great back then, and even great and fun to watch now. So yeah, as tough as it was with all these great movies, Hocus Pocus is probably the one that I kept watching the most at home during that time in that year. So I had to go with it.
Yeah, I can agree with that. All right, so 1994. I just want to throw out the honorable mention of Lion King. It's still probably top 3 all-time Disney movies for me. Also, the video game, have to mention that. But 1994 was the year of Jim Carrey, so I found myself looking at Ace Ventura, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber, and just trying to pick between those 3. 1994 was probably the hardest year just because of those 3 movies, because they're movies that I still watch today. Like, I still love today. They're like the trifecta of Jim Carrey movies. And I knocked The Mask out pretty quick, so I'm looking at Dumb and Dumber, Ace Ventura, Dumb and Dumber, Ace Ventura. How do you pick between those 2 movies? And I had to look at which one I watched the most, which one did I laugh the most at, which one do I still watch the most. And it was Ace Ventura. Dumb and Dumber, so close. If this was my wife, she'd probably tell me that I'm crazy. It'd be Dumb and Dumber because that's the one that I feel she would pick. But for me, Ace Ventura, I just feel... I think it might just be the fact that I love animals and there's animals in it, and I like the whole thing, like with the Miami Dolphins, and like I would say Ace Ventura definitely for 1994 is gonna be. It has to be my pick.
Yeah, that's a tough year. I mean, just going back through and looking at this, I mean, you had The Little Giants that year, The Page Master, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, Angels in the Outfield, The Little Rascals. I mean, this is tough. He's not going to be happy with my pick at all because I know it's a movie he doesn't like.
Yeah.
But this movie, not only do I think it was the best movie that year, if I had to pick that category as well, but even as just like a 6-year-old kid, this movie that isn't for kids at all just entertained me so much that I loved watching it, which is weird that I would be that young and love it. And that's Forrest Gump. I mean, I know he's not a big fan of the movie, but I was captivated by this movie, even at such a young age watching it. It's just this story of this guy that you would think isn't going to do much in life, and then he just ends up doing everything that changes the world. And from the scenes of him in Vietnam and fishing with Lieutenant Dan and chasing Jenny all over, trying, he's in love with her. And I just love this story, and it's a movie that I revisit once again pretty much every year. I revisit Forrest Gump. The other movie I would like to just throw out too that I forgot to mention, that a lot of countdown lists consider this the #1 movie of all time, is The Shawshank Redemption. If I had watched that movie back then, it may be my pick because I do love that movie, but I didn't watch it back then. I actually didn't watch Shawshank until like much later, like when I was a teenager, and that's a great movie too. But Forrest Gump, I rewatch it every year, and even as a 6-year-old kid, I really loved Forrest Gump, which you wouldn't think that, but I really did. And I remember the first time watching it too at home with my parents, and I've loved it ever since. So as tough as that year was, and I could probably rearrange, like if I really thought about it, like I could probably put Little Giants in that spot too, because it was tough. I know I watched that a lot, the Jim Carrey movies like Dumb and Dumber, but Forrest Gump, I keep watching that even more than those other movies today, so that's why I had to go with it.
Before you guys get your pitchforks and torches and chase me out of town, I don't hate Forrest Gump. I just think it's highly overrated. It's a good movie. It's just not one that I can I'm like, oh, I kind of want to watch him. You know what? I want to watch Forrest Gump. I don't know. But to each their own.
Yep.
But don't get me wrong. Tom Hanks does an amazing job. Can't take anything away from that. But
yep.
All right. So we are in 1995. So 1995, when I initially did, it was another one that, boom, that's got to be but that wasn't the case. So initially looking at it, I thought I would have to go with 7. But once again, the adult me and the child me were kind of battling. And that's what a lot of the early years before like the say like 2005, like when we're in the 80s, 90s, that's really what's happening. Like adult me's like it's that movie, but child me's like no, it's this one, fifth one. So child me won out in this one, and I could not go 7. I couldn't put 7 over Toy Story. Toy Story was my pick. Whenever it comes to animated movies, this and Aladdin are at a battle to which one would be number 1. So like Aladdin and Toy Story are my 1 and 2. It's just an amazing story. They do such a good job of once again creating a world where like toys that come to life when you're not around makes sense. Building like the backstory of the characters, like feeling for the characters, like how they love their owner Andy, and whenever he leaves, and what they will do to like save him, rescue him, get back to him, whatever it might be, because there are 4 of them. But yeah, Toy Story is going to be my pick. I mean, Die Hard with a Vengeance is also a huge honorable mention, because for me, the first Die Hard is obviously my favorite, and then it's going to go to the third one, which is Die Hard with a Vengeance, and we'll take a step back to number 2 for my third favorite, and then after that, it's just kind of, you should have just let it go. And then Bad Boys is also another. I couldn't make this list, or I couldn't do this video without at least mentioning Bad Boys, because I do still watch this over and over. And with the new one, I'm intrigued. I have yet to get a chance to go see it, but I mean, it's getting some mixed reviews.
Yeah.
But I think I still like it, because like the negative that I'm getting is kind of what I expected to get from it.
So 95 was a very tough one. When I first went on the website that listed all the movies that came out in 95, Toy Story was the first movie I saw, and I wrote it in the spot because I said that's going to be it. It's going to be Toy Story. I remember how much that movie meant to me. Then I kept scrolling, and I saw other really good movies I just want to mention because they're up there, but I didn't write them in. Mortal Kombat, Friday, Billy Madison, Casper, Major Payne, Tommy Boy, Congo. Not ashamed to say this, It Takes Two, with the Olsen twins. Used to love that movie as a kid. GoldenEye, hello, Braveheart. But then I'm scrolling and another movie pops up, and I said, you know what? Does this overtake Toy Story? And I said, yes, it does, and that was Jumanji. So I wrote in Jumanji. Okay,
this partnership's over.
I'm not done.
All right.
So I thought that had to be it. But then something else popped up, and I said, you know what? When I really thought about it, in 1995, what was the movie I was the most excited to see? Actually wore a partial costume to go see it, and when I left the theater, made my mom take me to go see it again. And that was Power Rangers, the movie. Power Rangers was my life back then. I went to school as the Red Ranger for Halloween that year. I had all the Power Ranger action figures. I love the TV show, and this movie, Power Rangers with Ivan Ooze, the villain, the purple ooze. I was obsessed with the Power Rangers. My mom took me and my buddy to see it, and literally I went back. She took me the next day to see it again. When it came out on video later in the year, I watched it probably every day over and over again. So I had to pick it. I mean, even though I love Toy Story and things like that, Power Rangers was my obsession back then. Obviously, I haven't watched the movie in years. I forget most of the movie, to be honest with you.
I watched it about 3 years ago.
Hold up at all?
To me, it did.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I could see to some saying that it doesn't, because the graphics and special effects are a little... But for me, that doesn't drive a movie.
Who was your favorite Power Ranger? Most people love the white Ranger.
Yeah, the White Ranger.
See, I was always the Red Ranger.
The red one was up there.
But yeah, I mean, that year, that was the most important film to me. It's definitely not the best movie of that year, but it was the most important. So it was my favorite film of that year. I had to pick it. So Power Rangers.
All right, I'll let that slide. If you would have went with
You're not a fan of Jumanji?
I am, but to try to put Jumanji up there with Toy Story and even Power Rangers, I mean, for me at least.
Gotcha.
So once again, 1996 was a no-brainer for me, even after looking. I don't know if we have the same, because once again, we don't go through this. But my honorable mentions, I'm going to go through, and I'm going to watch his reaction to see if I can figure out which one was his.
I'll keep a blank face.
But yeah, poker face. But my first honorable mention is Space Jam. I loved this movie when I was a little kid. When I was little, Saturday morning cartoons, you had the Looney Tunes. I love the Looney Tunes. And then you just do live action with the basketball, Michael Jordan and everything. It's just a solid movie. And then I saw From Dusk Till Dawn. I was like, that could be a movie. But I was like, once again, little me was like, no, it's this one. And then even adult me kind of agreed with the child whenever I actually did find my pick. Bulletproof is another honorable mention. That movie does not get enough love. I love Damon Wayans and Adam Sandler, and they put the two of them together. Add the action, I'm all in for that. And then Primal Fear, I have to say, is another one up there. But once again, it's the adult me. It's kind of like, and it's the reason I couldn't really pick Primal Fear is it's one of those movies that like you watch it, the end twist blows your mind, but it doesn't really have anything to get you to watch it again. But my pick was Happy Gilmore. I mean, I can still to this day watch this movie and laugh hysterically. It's one of my all-time favorite comedies. And as soon as I saw Happy Gilmore was this year, I was like, that's the movie. So for me, it's Happy Gilmore. I'm sure it's not the same as him, but let's see.
So 1996 was a no-brainer for me. In all of the years, what I do is I write down a bunch of honorable mentions. I think about it, I pull my hair out, and then I decide on one. In 96, I wrote the movie down first because I knew that it was going to be it. Now, mind you, there's some great ones in 96. Independence Day. Hello. Yes. If it wasn't for this other movie, I think Independence Day would have been my pick because I did love that movie. D3, The Mighty Ducks, Twister came out, The Nutty Professor, Jingle All the Way, Jack with Robin Williams, House Arrest, Fear, The Craft, all came out in 96. These are all movies I love. But, like I said, it was a no-brainer. If you notice with my list, the first 3 years were horror movies, from 88 through to 90. After that, from 91 all the way to 96, I didn't name a single horror movie. And even in my honorable mentions, you didn't really hear any. That's because horror movies were dead from 1990 to 96. There was such a string run of horror movies in the 80s that horror movies were literally coming out every week, whether it be in the theaters or straight to VHS, because they were so profitable that people started to get tired of them, and it got to a point where the horror movies were sort of dying off, and production companies did not want to make horror movies anymore, at least the big production companies. They thought they were trash. There was just too many of them. They were becoming too violent. So if you look at the years 90, like 91-ish to all the way through to 96, there's like 1 to 2 major horror movies a year. That's it. Everything else is straight to VHS, totally low budget. Basically, studios were done with horror movies. But in 1996, a guy by the name of Kevin Williamson decided to write a wonderful, crafty screenplay that Wes Craven and the Weinstein Company at Dimension Films decided to take a chance on. And not only did it become the biggest horror movie that year, but it broke the trend of studios thinking that horror movies wouldn't make money. And after that, you got a massive flux of late 90s slashers, especially teen slashers. And we've never lost the trend today. Horror movies are as big as ever today. And that movie, of course, is Scream. Without Scream, who knows when the horror movie trend would have ever come back? Who knows how long it would be till we got blockbuster movies? When my mom took me to see Scream in 96, I will still argue to this day, and I don't think a lot of people would argue with me, that it is one of the greatest horror movie openings of all time because of how shocking it was. You had such a big actress that everyone thought was going to be the main character get killed off in such a stylish way that you knew nobody was safe in this movie. I think it has some of the best characters ever in horror movie history, with Neve Campbell as Sidney Prescott, David Arquette as Dewey, Courtney Cox as Gale Weathers. The guessing game of who is the killer, and just the stylish way of the killer being on the phone with the creepy voice. Everyone tried to reenact that voice when they watched it. You prank called your friends with voice changers. How many people went as Ghostface for Halloween? I know I did. And I watched that movie in the theater, blown away when it came out on tape. Just rewatched it over and over again. It's in my top 5 horror movies of all time. When we did that countdown, because I love Scream, I love the franchise. That year, as big as Independence Day and all that was, Scream was my movie, and you got to thank it, because without it, horror movies may have stayed dead a lot longer. So thank you, Scream, and that's my 96 pick.
All right.